This is the Kingpin, and you're listening to the Air Raid Hour of Buffalo Fanatics Video Experience.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this is the Air Raid Hour presented by Buffalo Fanatics, and we are one. If you like, I guess it's nighttime, right? So we are about 1 day away from the Buffalo Bills stepping on the football field. The Buffalo Bills currently have a player with the number 1 in Emmanuel Sanders. Quick question for you before we get started. Who was the last Buffalo Bill to don the number 1?
I honestly, I don't even know. Has anyone? Was it a kicker or
I think it was Mike Hollis.
Yeah, Mike Hollis. Like
I also could be wrong. Someone might also pone me in the comment section, but I believe it was Mike Hollis.
Was Mike Hollis the one who
pre-Lindell?
Yeah, was he the one that kicked that field goal against the Vikings in that first Bledsoe year that like went off the crossbar and in, and then we ended up beating him in overtime with Peerless? Was that Mike Hollis?
I don't know.
Someone, Chris Janke will know.
I was like 14.
Chris Janke will know. And speaking of Chris Janke, he's in the house tonight along with D. Handsome, Bobby Ray, Richard Rush, David Cohn, Chris S., Sean Woods, and others are filing in. We're still getting people filing in now. So, yeah, I think that was Mike Hollis. I'm not sure.
Kendall comes in and says, I'll put money on Chris Janke poning you in the comment section. And thanks to Sean Woods here. If you guys could, right off the bat, it really helps us out with like the old YouTube algorithm. And you know me, I'm a narcissistic asshole. I like as many eyeballs on me as possible. So smash that like button and help us out here on this Monday night. We know you guys have a lot of choices in terms of Buffalo Bills content. So thank you for tuning in with us. It's always appreciated. And, Chris came in early and said, hey, I'm enjoying the judge's judgment on Twitter. It's time now. It's time now. It's time to get the takes out.
Well, can I ask you a question? You said you like all the eyes on you, and we're in this golf tournament coming up at the end of the month. Do you have when you golf, is your attire a flair for the dramatic, or do you keep it kind of subdued with your golf outfits?
I keep it subdued, but I'm also over the top. So like I wear long pants when I golf. I don't wear shorts. I wear long pants
every time.
Every time. Even in Arizona, I wear long pants. When I golf, I always have the polo and it's always tucked in, and I always got a hat to go with it.
You always have that's given.
I look like I'm in the PJ. I'm not someone who's do I look like Ricky Fowler? Hell no. Like I'm not rocking that kind of gear, but I also I'm not wearing cargo shorts and like Crocs, which like I see some other people at local golf courses in. So I would say that I toe the line. I don't know. How about you? I could see you rocking some Fowler gear.
No, that's not really my style. I like to keep it kind of classic. I'll wear some, like the other day I wore kind of like a salmon or pink colored shirt, but it was very tasteful. I'm surprised though when you said you wear pants every time in Arizona in that heat. Like that's got to be. I mean, that's impressive. Like I do not wear pants in the summer. Like there is no way. But I will tuck and I wear the hat, and I do keep it. I do kind of try to keep it tasteful. So
yeah, and that should be a lot of fun. Just a reminder to everyone: August 29th at Harvest Hill. You can join me. You can join Tilt. Pierre will be there. Zbot will be there. Did Clay say he was going to be there? Clay Troya. He'll be at the golf tournament. Clay Troya will be in the house. I believe the Thigh Doctor will be in the house. So we got a whole bunch of Buffalo Fanatics people going to experience that golf tournament with you, along with the likes of Joe Kroom. We also got Jordan Poyer, Stevie Johnson, and Gabriel Davis. So it should be a lot of fun. And the night before, August 28th, we'll also be hitting the town. The Buffalo Bills game. We'll get you some more details when we have details about maybe like some places where we might be meeting up to tailgate, and any bars we might be meeting up after the evening before the golf tournament. So we will keep you guys informed if you want to come out and you want to celebrate that preseason weekend. And it looks like Aaron Rodgers could be taking some snaps for the Packers, which just made my Vikings pick a hell of a lot more interesting when we did our NFL records prediction show. All right, let's get right into it. It's NFL training camp. We are one Mike Hollis away from the Buffalo Bills getting out there on the practice field. No more, well, this and this and this and this. Like, no, it's some concrete examples that we get to see. How's Antonio Williams looking shorts, Matt Breida looking shorts, how they look when you put the pads on, all those different things. Where's Dane Jackson lining up? How are they utilizing Gregory Rousseau? All those good things. Because Sean McDermott straight up said in OTAs, and we've had a million different conversations about OTAs. Well, Antonio Williams took advantage of some opportunities because Zach Moss wasn't participating and Matt Breida was only doing some drills. But then Sean McDermott straight up says, like, there is no depth chart in OTAs. There's just rep charts. Now there's depth charts. Now we're talking about the 5 guys on the offensive line that we see on Wednesday are the 5 guys that the Buffalo Bills believe in the most, barring anyone having any unforeseen injuries. As it changes over the week, it's because some guys are earning it and some guys are falling back. So now the depth chart does become a factor. It does stink that COVID rules are in effect again. So the likes of Matt Perino and Sal Capaccio and Joe Biscaglia, guys who are at practice, still can't tell you who's taking reps where. Let's all say a prayer for Chris Brown. Let's hope he doesn't get suspended again.
Oh my God. Yeah. Actually, that would make for a fun story to talk about, but hey, I don't want to.
But let's get right into it and let's start talking about the offense. And as always, we want you guys to join in on the conversation. And we want to talk about the training camp battles on offense. And we're going to go position by position today. And even if it's not a battle, just something we're looking forward to watching. And you can consider this a battle, or you can consider this just something you're looking forward to watching. But for me, one of the number one things I'm looking at, oddly enough, is Jake Fromm versus himself. Not Jake Fromm versus Mitch Trubisky, not Jake Fromm versus Josh Allen. I'm going to be really interested in Jake Fromm versus himself, because I made this comment in one of my judges' judgments, and I've made the comments in some of these shows previous. If Jake Fromm comes out and looks like a competent, NFL quarterback, an SEC, Georgia type of middle round draft pick, if he lives up to that hype and he isn't embarrassing himself out there and doesn't look like he's out of his element and his arm looks like it's decently NFL caliber, I don't envision the Buffalo Bills keeping 2 quarterbacks. I think it's 3 quarterbacks. If Jake Fromm doesn't look like he's going to cut it out there, I envision the Buffalo Bills keeping 2 quarterbacks and Davis Webb making his practice squad. So it's not like it's Jake Fromm versus Davis Webb for QB3 in a sense, because I only think there's a roster spot for one of them, and that's Jake Fromm. Now, if Fromm doesn't make it, then Webb becomes QB3 on the practice squad. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, my pre-camp prediction only had 2 quarterbacks on the roster, so I think Jake Fromm would really have to show something, right? And it gets back to the question of, we saw what the Bills did in the draft, and they clearly were not just drafting for 2021, which Bean came out and said. So the question, if you're the Bills now, if Jake Fromm performs well, how do you draw that line, or how do you make the decision on one less guy on the 53 at another position to ensure that you have Jake Fromm beyond 2021 as your backup quarterback? It will be very interesting to see how much value the Bills put on that roster spot if Jake Fromm does indeed perform well in camp and in the preseason, because we know that Mitch Trubisky is going to be the backup this year. That's not a question. The question will be if the Bills keep 2 or 3 quarterbacks. And if they do keep 3, like you said, it's because they have an eye, I think, on 2022 and essentially signaling to the organization, signaling to us and to the fans that Jake Fromm is going to be the backup quarterback in 2022 with Mitch Trubisky here only on a 1-year deal. So it will be very interesting to see if the Bills go that route and sacrifice a roster spot at another position, especially given all the chatter we've had around, like, how do we find a way to keep a 10th lineman or on either side, or a 7th receiver? So yeah, I mean, it is Jake Fromm against himself. I definitely agree with you.
And Jason Taylor comes in with a comment that says, preseason games will go a long way to determine Fromm's future. You've made this comment before. We really don't need to see much of Josh Allen. We probably don't even need to really see that much of Mitch Trubisky. It should be the Jake Fromm and Davis Webb show this preseason.
Especially with only 3 games. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it should be a from a majority of most of these games, but even then, it's going to be really interesting to see how teams play him. If teams are just playing base vanilla defenses, Jake Fromm, like this is a guy who quarterbacked in the SEC, made it to the college football playoffs. Like against vanilla defenses, especially with the depth that the Buffalo Bills have on both their offensive line at their skill positions, he's going to put up numbers. So to me, I'm paying most attention to practice because I think practice is where they're going to throw they're going to throw the kitchen sink at him and really see what this guy has as a quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be as much, in preseason. And Kendall comes back and says, "Can you debunk the idea that Mitch Trubisky is trade bait, please?" I got no problem with that. If Josh Allen goes down for an extended period of time, let's say for an example, knock on wood here, he's out for the rest of the season. Week 6, he tears his ACL, he's done for the year. The Buffalo Bills can still make the playoffs, and the Buffalo Bills can still make a run in the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky if other things go right, like the defense rebounds and becomes a top 10, 15 unit. Buffalo Bills aren't making the playoffs with Jake Fromm. Nope. The Buffalo Bills aren't making the playoffs with Davis Webb. They got a shot with Mitch Trubisky, and that's why they brought Mitch Trubisky here. To me, Jake Fromm will always be a guy who could be like a serviceable 3 to 4 game guy. Like, oh, okay, your quarterback's out a month. We just want Jake Fromm to go 2-2. Hold down the fort. Trubisky can be more than that. Trubisky is probably going to be a career stopgap starter, have a Ryan Fitzpatrick type career where he's probably bouncing around the league, starting one place, but never quite latching on, flashing here, flashing there. He's a guy who you can catch fire with and win some football games with. You've seen the Chicago Bears do it and the formula there to have the defense. If the Buffalo Bills are truly in the Super Bowl window and they truly have this bargain type of guy, I don't think they're going to give up on him. It would take an immense amount. It would take an insane amount of capital. Like, I mean,
and especially given how much of a bargain they're paying for him. I think if anything, your trade bait is Jake Fromm. Now the Bills may say we don't even want to try to trade Jake Fromm because if he performs well, now we're feeling pretty confident, like I said, that he might be your backup in 2022. The Bills, Bean has shown that he's willing to trade quarterbacks in the rotation before. He did it with AJ McCarron and the Raiders. So I don't think it's out of the picture to think that Jake Fromm could be traded, but the Bills are going to probably have to get at worst what they drafted him with, a 5th rounder. And if they don't get more than that and they see him as the backup quarterback beyond 2021, I don't think Bean will sit there and say, like, we're going to trade him, because to have a backup quarterback for a 5th rounder and not have to pay a free agent, I think that value will outweigh any trade that you might get. So
Truth to Heart's coming in with the comment. He says, hell no, the starter should play in the preseason snap count wise. We had the potential to start 4-0. I don't want to start off slow and lose games we should win because maybe we're rusty or something like that. I mean, it's a good point. I've always been one of those people to outweigh injuries, or to weigh not risking injury to the risking of the rust and things like that. But it's definitely a delicate balance, and it'll be really interesting to see with a 3-game preseason how Sean McDermott decides to handle it, because Jason Taylor even comes in and says starters will play a half, just a matter of which game, can't go into the season cold. So they think that in one of these games, the starters will go the entire first half. Maybe it'll be maybe because so you might think to yourself, well, it's going from 4 to 3. So the starters will play the full first half in the second game, and the backups will all play in the third game. But that third game is quite a significant amount of time before the start of the season. So, I mean, let me double check here on my schedule, but that game, that last preseason game is on the 29th. And then the Buffalo Bills don't play again until the opener on like the 12th or something like that. So yeah, the 28th, and then they don't play again until the 12th. So that's 12, 13, 14. That's 15 days. That's over 2 weeks between the Packers game, the preseason game, and the Steelers game, the home opener. 15 days, over 2 weeks. So it wouldn't shock me if that third game is where we see a majority of the starters play the first half, as opposed to like maybe the second game where some people might assume.
Hey, I mean, you'll be at the game, and maybe I'll be able to sneak my way into that game. So not illegally, but if I get there in time, I will try to make it. Yeah, that I will say this. I was combing through the BF fan shop because I need to get some new gear for this trip, and I really like the new logo we've got, and I happened to come across our Bills guys shirt is still on there. It's still on there, man. It was on the
I think
first page.
the promo code might still work. So head on over to the BF fan shop, use the promo code Bills guys, and you might be able to get yourselves 10% off.
You
Too.
can because
Just
I've been sending people some stuff because there was one guy who pointed out that someone was ripping off our shows on YouTube, so I sent him some gear and I used the promo code. It works.
Mhm.
So
Look at that. Get yourself 10% off. And then I think we each get $5. That's not too bad either.
I haven't seen
Uh,
any of that, but that's okay.
oh, dude, I every once in a while I'll get a $5.
Okay, okay. All
Oh
right. Well,
wow.
you know what?
Oh
That's
wow.
okay.
Dude, you're the one in
That's
charge of the money. What are you doing?
I don't do that. I don't do
Oh, okay.
the Teespring stuff. So yeah.
All right. So that brings us on to running backs. And so for the whole battle part, right? I sort of had it framed when I was starting as, all right, well, it's Motor versus Moss for RB1, and then it's sort of like um Antonio Williams versus Matt Breida
Mm.
for the depth, like for the possibility to be RB3 or RB4, however you want to define it. But could an Antonio Williams or could a Matt Breida sneak up and get into the RB1, RB2 competition? Or do you think that there is a solid division down the middle between these two competitions?
I mean, I think it's clear that Singletary and Moss are at least or at worst going to camp the top two dogs, right? I think that for me, and I forgot who I think Aaron Quinn might have said this on Twitter.
Mhm.
There may not be an RB1 on this team. And that's kind of where I come out. Like, I don't know that this team has an RB1, and I don't know that they need an RB1. Like, there's not enough volume in the running game really for to really matter that we have an RB1. I just want whoever's in there to be effective. So yeah, if it ends up being like a 3-man rotation or even a 2-man rotate, like I don't care. Like Antonio Williams, Matt Breida, yeah, they might have a chance to sneak up, and if Antonio Williams makes the team, Matt Breida makes the team, one of the two of them make the team. Yeah, they might be in the rotation, but the Bills really haven't ever deployed a 3-man running back group on game days. It's always been 2 guys typically. And that makes
Mhm.
sense for this team because they're such a
Yeah.
pass heavy offense. So do either of those guys have a chance to be RB1? Sure. And I'm only saying that because I don't know that Moss or Singletary is like what you would consider like a quote RB1,
Mhm.
but they're clearly the top 2 going into camp.
Yeah, we got some good comments here. Randy comes in and says, doesn't matter who the running back is, as long as he hits the average yards per carry the team wants. Brian Daboll has been really into the analytics. Like you saw the Buffalo Bills pass on first down a ton last year, and that is because of Brian Daboll's belief in the analytics that you're supposed to throw the ball on first down, that running the ball on first down, like the percentages just aren't with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it wouldn't surprise me if Brian Daboll also has sort of a goal for his running backs, the yards per carry he wants to see from his running back. And he doesn't give a darn who gets it for him. It's just that. Matt Soda coming in with a great comment. He says, Antonio Williams is a guy who can be safely stashed on the practice squad. At least for now, I think that's the safe assumption. If Antonio Williams comes out in the preseason and blows it up like he did week 17 against the Dolphins, maybe not as safe as an assumption. Matt Breida has that trait that no one else has, speed and that pass catching ability to bring a much needed dimension to the defense. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at what the Buffalo Bills have invested in the running back position, they invested a 3rd-round pick and now 2 years of development in Devin Singletary. They invested a 3rd-round pick and now a year of development in Devin Singletary. They invested a year of development on the practice squad of Antonio Williams. I know he was off and on for a little bit in the beginning, but it was pretty consistent towards the end. And he was with the team through training camp. So you got Antonio Williams, a year of development. What have they invested in Matt Breida? They invested 1 year, like $1.25 million non-guaranteed. So I think the pecking order going into training camp is probably going to be Singletary and Moss for the starting reps because of that capital invested in them. And then I honestly think Antonio Williams might have an edge over Matt Breida because of the time they invested in them. I'm not saying that's how the Buffalo Bills depth chart is going to shake out, but I'm saying like that's where it's going to lean. And that's where sort of I think the reps are going to go early. But that doesn't mean that a guy like Matt Breida, he can't come out. And like what Matt Soda says here, his speed is undeniable. His pass catching ability is undeniable. The Buffalo Bills have to move him up the depth chart because of the way he plays. That's going to be the interesting thing to me is when we get to training camp, who's making the Gabriel Davis highlights this year? Who's the one taking the bull by the horn in practice and saying to the Buffalo Bills, you can't cut my ass. I'm too valuable. You need to make me a part of your game plan. So as much as Motor and Moss are the likely two guys who are going to be the starters for this team, or the 1A and the 1B, Matt Breida has a chance. Antonio Williams have a chance. All they got to do is show up in training camp and just say to just show on the practice field, you can't bench me. You can't sit me. You can't bury me on the depth chart. You can't cut me. So that's going to be the really exciting thing about training camp and preseason this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you just said along the lines of what Don's comment is here. I don't think investment counts for much. It's performance. So if Breida shows up, he wins. And yeah, I mean, the Bills have a handful of guys here on 1-year deals between Lamp and Breida and Sanders. Now, Sanders is in a different category than the other two, but a team primed to make a championship run signs guys and spots to these types of deals because they can get in, they can go on this run. If these guys help, great. If not, no big deal. We only invested you for 1 year and we can go back to figure it out again next year. So there is value in signing these guys to 1-year deals. But yeah, I still think that what you said is right. Singletary and Moss will lead the pecking order to start. Could we sneak Taiwan Jones onto the practice squad? I mean, is it even worth it to sneak Taiwan Jones onto the practice squad? I mean, if he doesn't make the team, like I don't know that it's worth it.
This is the interesting question here, because I know that there are a couple of people in the comment section, Randy Harmon included, who think the Buffalo Bills are going to keep 4 running backs, and those 4 running backs are going to be Motor, Moss, Williams, and Breida. Like, they're going to keep all 4. I personally find it hard to believe, just seeing how the Buffalo Bills have utilized the running back position for 2 years now, where it's been, you got your 1A, you got your 1B, and the third guy is inactive, and the fourth guy is Taiwan Jones. That's why when I did my 53-man roster projection, I went with Antonio Williams and I went with 3, because I think Antonio Williams gives you special teams flex and can play on game day. Taiwan Jones, to me, his roster spot is dependent on the secondary. Like, it's not even dependent on the running backs in front of him. Like, I don't think there's really much at this point in time that Taiwan Jones can do to show that he could be an offensive weapon for the Buffalo Bills. It's going to come down to, like, all right, Dane Jackson and Saran Neal prove they can be our gunners. Rashad Wildgoose look good gunning. We can feel comfortable letting Taiwan Jones go. And a guy like Taiwan Jones, you mentioned, it's not worth it wasting the practice squad spot. If Taiwan Jones gets cut, I don't think Taiwan Jones wants to sit on a practice squad either. He's probably just going to work out in his zone, stay healthy, stay ready. And when either the Buffalo Bills or another team needs a special teams ace, he'll be there to sign a contract. I don't know if Taiwan Jones would even want to be on a practice squad. He's for what he does. I don't think he needs to limit himself to just the Buffalo Bills. He could just sit at home, work out on his own, and I think he'd be getting calls for someone's practice squad or the Buffalo Bills if an injury were to occur.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on a team every year, right, since he's been in the league. So I don't think all of a sudden he's just gonna, be done with playing, in the NFL this year. So he'll be on a team. I agree with you there.
I mean, and Chris S comes in and he says, "Are we sure the pass run balance isn't going to change this year?" No, and that's another cool part about training camp and preseason. What kind of packages are the Buffalo Bills running? Are we seeing them at practice running 12 personnel with 2 tight ends out on the field with like Hollister and Knox? Are we seeing them like line Reggie Gilliam up at fullback? Are we seeing them spread them out? Like, what kind of packages are the Buffalo Bills practicing and utilizing at practice? What are they doing in some of the preseason games? I know it's still vanilla, but I don't think the Buffalo Bills are going to run out there and run a bunch of 12 personnel in training camp or in preseason and then not run it all in the regular season. I think they would run vanilla out of sort of the packages that they wanted to run. So it'll be really interesting. I think you'll see a little bit more run balance this year. Not so much in the fact that they'll really emphasize the run. But I just don't think you're going to see any more games like Seattle where Josh Allen just literally throws the ball a game. Like I think those kind of things will probably go away if you can just, as Randy mentioned earlier, have your running backs hitting that yards per carry clip.
Mhm.
Like if we had any faith in Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, we probably wouldn't have thrown as much as we did that game. I think it was just as much trying to catch Seattle off guard and Seattle having a really bad pass defense as it was the Buffalo Bills just not really having much faith in their running game and their ability to get that yards per carry average that they wanted. So a good question there from Chris S. All right, let's move it on now to the wide receivers.
Hmm.
I have two things that I'm going to be looking at. One of them has special teams implications, obviously kick returner, punt returner. Is it Marquez Stevenson versus Isaiah McKenzie for one roster spot and say like an Isaiah Hodgins versus Jake Kumaro for the second roster spot? Or is it more fluid than that? Is it that concrete or is it more fluid?
I think it's more fluid. I think it depends on whether the Bills break the norm and keep 7 wide receivers. I think it depends on how well Marquez Stevenson shows that he
Mhm.
can return kicks and possibly even punts. I think it also depends on whether Marquez Stevenson shows he can add anything to you out of the slot for, as a potential backup to Cole Beasley, or even as a guy that can potentially do the same things that Isaiah McKenzie has done for you the past few years. Isaiah Hodgins versus Kumaro, yeah, I don't know about that one, because I would think that if Kumaro makes the team, something very weird happened, right? Either the Bills kept like 8 receivers or 7, and guys like McKenzie and uh like someone like 2 of the 3 of McKenzie, Hodgins, and
Mhm.
Stevenson did not make the team. So it's I think it's a little more fluid than that. When I think about this receiver battle, I think about it's either it's either really 3 guys trying to make a case that the Bills should keep 3 extra spots, meaning 4 plus the
Mhm.
3, or it's 3 guys fighting for 2 spots should the Bills keep the 6. So in my mind, I think it comes down to can all 3 of those guys show you enough to convince the coaching staff that we have to keep all 3, or will 2 of the guys separate themselves enough to say, "You know what? We're only gonna keep 6. This guy's the odd man out, and we need that roster spot
Mhm.
at another position." So to me, that's what it comes down to, whether or not it's those 3 for 2 spots or those 3 for
Mhm.
3 spots, and they keep 7.
I Part of me thinks that we might be sleeping on some of the depth of this roster as well. Like James FX90 comes in and says, and he might be being sarcastic here, but how have y'all forgotten about Tanner Gentry is going to be wide receiver 7?
He could be
But
the Delshon Phillips.
but I think there is something to be said about players who look good at OTAs, the Des Lewis effect, where they show up to training camp and it's just not there. Now, I know Isaiah Hodgins flashed a little bit at training camp last year before the injury, but we also there are some players here who we love their college stuff and we love their potential and they ooze that potential. But sometimes guys get to the NFL and they just can't hack it. So like
Mhm,
Marquez Stevenson could show up on the first day of practice and he just can't separate against NFL defenders. Or
mhm.
like he's just not strong enough to get off the line of scrimmage. Or Isaiah Hodgins shows up and like as good as his route running is, he just can't separate. Like things of that nature. So like as much as we love the potential of Isaiah Hodgins, as much as we love the potential of Marquez Stevenson, maybe one or both of them just don't show up in training camp and it's just not there.
Possible.
Then a guy like Jake Kumaro comes into play. Special teams ability, big body guy, was with Green Bay forever because Aaron Rodgers liked him for a reason. In his limited action last year, caught that touchdown pass in the Denver game from Josh Allen. Then guys like Brandon Powell and Lance Lenoir come into play, especially
Mhm.
if a guy like Isaiah McKenzie can't prove that he can handle himself as a kick and punt returner. So I think we're sleeping a little bit on the depth of the wide receiver position. And that's why it's going to be so fun to watch. Because I mean, you're going to be in the fourth quarter of these preseason games and it's probably going to be Marquez Stevenson, Tanner Gentry on the outside, and guys like Duke Williams and Jake Kruger on the slot. Like it'll be fun to watch. I think that Isaiah Hodgins will probably get his run with guys like Mitch Trubisky. Isaiah McKenzie will probably get their run with guys like Mitch Trubisky.
And you mentioned Powell, and that was
Mm-hmm.
like I forgot the exact question, but someone asked the question in the Q&A last week, like, what's the one guy we're not talking about that has like a outside chance to make the team? And it could be Powell, right? If he proves that he's going to be a really
Mhm.
efficient and potentially, a little bit of a flashy guy as a kick returner and a punt returner, there's a
Mhm.
chance for him to make his way into that Andre Roberts role if he really shows well. And especially in the preseason, he's going to have plenty of chances. A guy like
Mhm.
Powell will, because the Bills are going to be sitting there thinking, or at least if I'm the Bills, I'm sitting there thinking, like, I got to make sure we have this kick return, punt return situation figured out.
Mhm.
So while we may give McKenzie a few chances, and obviously they probably will, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of Stevenson and a lot of Powell doing kick and punt returns during the preseason, because you never
Mhm.
know, man. Powell
Yeah.
flashes. He could steal that job.
Got a couple of interesting things in the comment section. We got Brian Bowers in the building. Says, "What's up, fellas? Just dropping by to show some love. How you doing, Brian?" We got Ombre Live in the building saying, "I'm late, but I'm here, boys. Judge and Tilt, let's go." We also got Elliot in the building as well, saying he's a little late, but that's okay. And Elliot says, 83 watching, 23 likes. Do your thing, Bills Mafia. So if you're loving the depth that the Buffalo Bills have, if you're just super excited to get to the preseason, and the Buffalo Bills in the third quarter are going to be toting out some players that could probably start on some NFL teams, and that thought excites you, smash that like button. We got 80,
Mhm.
84, 85 people in here, 83 people in here, only 23 likes. So if you could please help us out, smash that like button. Really would appreciate it. The next competition I want to talk about was tight end a little bit.
Mm.
So Dawson Knox, this is another thing. Just like sort of like Jake Fromm versus himself, this is a little different. Dawson Knox versus his expectations is what I'm going to want to talk about. And we're going to, John, when we're done talking tight ends, we'll get your super chat. Really appreciate it. Dawson Knox versus expectations. Went to tight end U this year, going into his third year, has that ceiling. Talked about how he worked with the hand-eye coordinator specialist. The drops aren't going to be an issue this year. He's got the athletic ability of the upper echelon tight ends in this league. He's just not putting it all together. Dawson Knox versus expectations is one of the number one things I'm going to be looking at. And if Dawson Knox can't live up to those expectations, then I think Jacob Hollister is a guy who maybe is going a little under the radar this offseason, as a guy who could impact this offense. What are your thoughts?
I do think Jacob Hollister will impact the offense. I also think that expectations kind of have to be defined about Dawson Knox kind of heading into the year, right? I've been very vocal about saying, like, where's the volume going to come from? Like, if your expectations for him are statistical breakthrough, I don't know
Mhm.
that you're going to see a massive breakthrough. Now, we look back at his targets from last year, and he only caught about a little bit over 50% of his targets. So, with the same target share that he had last year, he can improve on his numbers slightly from a year ago. Maybe he's a 35 catch guy this year, right? I don't think that would be considered a bad season if he shows a little more consistency. We
Mhm.
know he's had the splashy flash plays. Can he do that a little bit more consistency when he gets his opportunities? And can he say, like, look, I'm going to have to accept the fact that I'm not going to get a ton of targets, most likely, maybe in
Mhm.
the 40 to 50 range for the entire year. Can I make the most of those targets and catch 35 balls on my 45 or so targets, 45 or 50 targets? If so, then we're talking about Dawson Knox as a guy who I think is meeting the expectations
Yeah.
in 2021.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. For him, it's not going to be like, can he develop into this guy like Stephon Diggs that you have to feed the football to? It's like, no, can he develop into a guy who, when you get the football to him, he can make the most of the opportunities given to him.
Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
that's how tight end really works in this offense. So I'm with you there. But if Dawson Knox for whatever reason starts to get the dropsies or whatever, I can see and I can envision Dawson Knox transitioning into a tight end two role and Jacob Hollister becoming the workhorse if he's more consistent. Like I can
Mhm,
picture it. Like, is that an ideal scenario? No. Would that really stink if that happened? Yes.
mhm.
But it's something I can envision because it's definitely going to be just something to watch this year. Dawson Knox versus those expectations for him. John DeMarshi coming to the super chat. I always appreciate you, John. He says Chandler Jones leads the NFL in sacks and forced fumbles from 2016 to 2020. At a 15.5 cap hit for 2021, the Bills can afford to cut Vernon Butler and then make the cut of Cole Beasley on offense. So sacrificing a little bit of offense to bump up your defense, plus still have the cap room that they have $9 million, not much to afford a Chandler Jones. no one's blocking Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver, Groot, and Chandler Jones in a NASCAR package. It's tough here, right? Because his cap hit this year is $15.5 million. I know Greg Tomset of Cover One, really good with salaries and things like that, stated that you can probably backload the contract that you give him, because that's the thing. Chandler Jones wants out of Arizona, not because he's miserable in Arizona. Trust me, I'm sure he loves living in Scottsdale. I'm sure he would love to play opposite of JJ Watt this year. He wants to leave because they're not willing to pay him, and he wants to get that one last payday at the age of 31. So if you really look at some comparables, you're probably going to have to pay him upwards of probably $17 to $20 million on average for 2-3 seasons. That's a pretty stinking large chunk of change, especially when you're going to be having to pay Tremaine Edmonds soon. Stephon Diggs is probably going to want a new contract soon. Josh Allen is going to need a new contract soon. So there's a whole bunch of factors in play. Now, with some of the Buffalo Bills' better defense players along defensive line, like Basham, Oliver, Groot, Epinesa, all being years away from cashing in, could you afford Chandler Jones? You could probably make it work if you wanted to. The thought of it makes my head hurt. I would love to see Chandler Jones on this football team, but what are you willing to give up for a 31-year-old defender? Are you willing to give up a second-round pick? Like, is that something you're willing to do? I just don't know if that's something the Buffalo Bills would consider. What are your thoughts with a guy like Chandler Jones? Obviously he fits and he would be awesome on this football team. But what would you be willing to give up? How much would you be willing to pay?
I mean, as a player, I'd love to have him. I think you're probably having to give up a guy like Addison if someone's willing to take him. I think you're going to have to make some cuts, like John said, in other positions. I think had the Bills not invested early draft capital in Groot and in Basham, that this could have been something they might have made a play for. I mean, the net gain of getting Jones over Addison, I think obviously is a positive one. But again, like there's a lot of money that you have to kind of work out to make it happen. Second round pick. Look, if you can get 3 good years out of Chandler Jones, he probably is worth a second. He is worth a second, but not a second in Boogie. There's no way. I'm not trading the guy you just drafted, who you don't know what the ceiling is yet for him, and a second rounder for him. A second rounder alone, I probably would consider if I knew I was going to get 3 good years out of him. But you have to remember, like, the reason it's only a second is because you're going to also have to pay him 17, 20 million, and you're going to get, so I don't know, man. This is a tough one. This is a tough one.
I know he's a good player, but I'm sitting here just waiting out the likes of Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes to infuse some youth. So to take another risk on a player on the wrong side of 30, as good as Jones is, it's a pass for me as well. But also not so much Miami, but if he did go to Indianapolis, that would scare the hell out of me. He would be a really good fit there in Indy, and they're 43. Because they do need some edge rushers. Like, if you look into these roster, like they're stacked everywhere. They have a really good solid roster. The one spot that's like a glaring hole, even though they drafted Kwity Paye, is edge rusher. So the thought of him on the Colts is a little scary. All right, let's move on to the offensive line now. In interest, and tell me if you think I'm wrong. I think that when we go into training camp, I think John Feliciano is probably going to get the first reps at right guard. Depending on health, I think Cody Ford's going to get the first reps at left guard. But the left guard competition, I think, is where all the eyes are going to be for the Buffalo Bills. Could John Feliciano fall out of favor at right guard? And, could he tumble down the depth chart and some other people rise up, or Cody Ford flip over? Of course. But to me, it could end up being a 3-way battle. That's going to be Cody Ford, Ike Butker, who started a ton of games there last year. Offensive line coach Bobby Johnson loves him. The Buffalo Bills have been developing him for years. And there's the newcomer Forrest Lamp. What are your thoughts on that 3-way competition there at left guard?
I love it. And because I think that between, Cody Ford and the expectations we have around him, adding a third guy to the mix when you signed Forrest Lamp, because you already had, well, at that time, I guess you hadn't, maybe, I don't remember the timing of when we got Butker back, but it doesn't really matter. 3 guys in the competition is nice, I think, because you are hopefully guaranteed to get at least an above average level of play out of whoever wins that competition, because Cody Ford, a high draft pick, Ike Bucker, a guy who's played solidly and we know has been developed by the coaching staff, and Forrest Lamp, a guy who started 16 games last year, even though he didn't grade out well at PFF, has some talent and had talent and should still have that talent coming in from when he came into the league. So I don't think that it's like a Brian Winters situation where we're like debating whether it's like who was it, Spencer Long. Spencer Long, was that the guy he was like competing against?
Yeah.
And then we ended up just cutting Spencer Long like before camp even started or whatever it was. This is like a real competition. And they now have preseason to get those extra reps. So whereas last year you really could only go by training camp practices, having 3 guys there, I think this year isn't going to take away much from the competition from, oh, we got to make sure this guy gets enough reps because you have the preseason as well. So I love the fact that it's a 3-man battle. I want Cody Ford to win the battle. I think everyone kind of hopes Cody Ford wins the battle to make the draft pick pan out and look good. But may the best man win, right? May the best man win. Like Don said before, performance is what you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's going to be, Forrest Lamp is such an anomaly to me. Like, it's really hard for me to wrap my head around him. And that's what's going to be so much fun about training camp, is just seeing where the Buffalo Bills put Forrest Lamp, because going in, I'm fairly confident that Cody Ford's going to get the first crack at left guard. Who knows? We could all be wrong. We they could put the pads on Wednesday, or they could put the shorts on Wednesday. I don't think they're going to go pads right away, but they could go, and Forrest Lamp could be lining up with the first team on Wednesday. Who knows? And then all of a sudden, the conversation that we've been having for 3-4 months is completely flipped on its head. The snap of a finger. One day at practice, the conversation that we've been spending 3 months on, the thing that we've been projecting for 3 months, just flips on its head. So it'll be really interesting to see, because Ike Bucker played okay last year at left guard, despite the fact that everyone hated him. He overcame the hatred. He used it to fuel him. He used it to fuel him. And he had a serviceable year at left guard. He continues to train. The Buffalo Bills continue to develop him. And I really do think that the Buffalo Bills put a lot into the development of these guys. And I think that the time that they spend on these guys, shouldn't be overlooked. And that's where it confuses me with Forrest Lamp, because Forrest Lamp, to me, you'd think, all right, right away, Forrest Lamp is in competition for left guard. Maybe we come out right away and we see Lamp and Butker at left guard competing, and we see Ford and Feliciano going back and forth at right guard. Or maybe Lamp switches over to right guard and we see Lamp at right guard. So like I said, Wednesday is going to clear up a lot of these things. And that's what's so exciting about it, is like, it's going to change the narrative. It's going to give us something new to talk about. It's going to give us something new to assess. And it's going to probably make some of us look real stupid, because we've been talking about 3 months about how we think Cody Ford's locked into left guard and John Feliciano is locked into right guard.
2 things really quick.
Yeah.
Number 1, John DeMarchi, do not be so hard on yourself. You're willing to put your takes out there, and we appreciate that. So don't even worry about it.
Trust me, we miss having an elite pass rusher too. It was fun. The Jim Schwartz defense.
Yeah, and Ombre Law brings up Jack Anderson. Does Jack Anderson have a legit chance in the left?
I don't think he has a chance to start. As much as I love Baby Richie, I don't think he has a chance. But if he does, Ombre Law, we will give you credit. I will say this though, in terms of depth, this is where it gets interesting. If Cody Ford does win the left guard job, if John Feliciano is the right guard, you have Ryan Bates, who's center guard versatile. You have Ike Bucker, who's center guard versatile. Both of these guys, the Buffalo Bills have invested a ton of time in. Then it comes down to, do you make Forrest Lamp your 9th or 10th offensive lineman, make him your TJ Yeldon of offensive lineman, and he's inactive every game day unless there's an injury to your starter? Or do you opt to take the chance of releasing that veteran player that you can get solid ability out of, hope that if injuries happen, Butker or Bates can fill in, and you keep a younger guy like Jack Anderson on your roster? That's the interesting part. Or if Forrest Lamp beats out Cody Ford, you then have to ask yourself, like, man, this is year 3 of Cody Ford. Do we just cut him loose? Do we try to trade him and go with another guy that we invested in Jack Anderson as depth? So those are the questions I think you start asking yourself. Is it might be Jack Anderson versus whoever loses one of those guard jobs to be
Mhm.
the 8th, 9th, or 10th offensive lineman. That's a competition that comes into play. Does Jack Anderson play well enough to give a veteran the boot and keep him on the roster as a backup? I think that's where that comes in.
But you almost get a 2-for-1 though
Mhm.
with Jack Anderson on the practice squad because you get to keep the veteran. But you're right, if he plays well enough to earn that spot, then it's a
Mhm.
different story. Ryan Thiel comes in, says, "Hey everyone, been very busy. Just give a shout out to the BF squad. Thank you, Ryan. We really appreciate that." And
Yeah, man.
I mean, we're about to be finally like busy
We're
with some
back, baby.
real
We're back. We're
with some
back.
real talk starting
We're
Thursday because
back.
the time between the draft and now, I mean, we've managed to still do 2 shows a week. I mean,
Yeah, I had no
I
idea
don't
how
know
we
how
did it.
we did it. I blacked
Thank you,
out
Jeff.
during the whole summer.
Jeff Landers is, I think, how we did it.
Yes. So thank you, Ryan. We really do appreciate that. We know you got a lot of options, so we love the support and
Yeah,
smash those likes.
and hey, yeah, we just got into the triple digits here at the 45-minute mark. We got 103 people in the building, and that's what I'm talking about. People are back. We're starting to see some names that maybe went away for the offseason, and that's okay. Some people are just regular season folks who come right on back for training camp. So we welcome you back with open arms. If you could do us a favor, smash those likes and let's just football's back, baby. It's back. It's back. Some teams are already back at training camp. I think the Cowboys and the Steelers are back because of the Hall of Fame game. So it should be fun. One last note on the offensive line: Spencer Brown
Okay.
and Tommy Doyle. I think Tommy Doyle. Oh, look at that, Caitlin Blunt. Yes, we are back. Welcome back,
Sorry.
Caitlin. I haven't seen
We
you
were
in a
both
while
going
there. Oh,
for
we
it at
both
the
clicked at the
same
same time. So we got Spencer Brown. And I think this is really important to look at this. Look at this. Bills Mafia. Gotta love it.
It's contagious, man. It's
Yeah.
contagious.
I really hope I'm saying this right. I think it's Cian. I also could be wrong. Cian Malone or Kian Malone. Really appreciate your super chat there. Yes, go Bills. We are back, baby. Better than ever. It is Super Bowl or bust for the Buffalo Bills this year. And part of that is going to be what happens if a good player gets hurt, a Deion Dawkins or a Darrell Williams. We have a guy here in Spencer Brown, who we drafted the 3rd round, very raw. Kendall and Clay just did a BF film room about him. Go watch that BF film room. It was awesome. They break down everything about Spencer Brown's game there, playing at Northern Iowa. So my question is, what I want to see, one of the battles I want to see is Spencer Brown versus NFL competition. Spencer Brown versus the speed of the game. Because if Spencer Brown heads into preseason and looks like a turnstile, then
Hope Pierre's not listening.
yeah. And that's not a knock on Spencer Brown. Like if he looks like a turnstile, that doesn't mean, oh, we wasted a 3rd round pick. It just could mean he needs a while. But guess what? What happens if Deion Dawkins gets hurt? What happens if Darrell Williams gets hurt? You can't throw a turnstile. I think that Spencer Brown's gonna be fine. I think he's got the athletic ability to sort of learn on the fly. And I think NFL coaching is going to do wonders for him. I know he worked with Joe Staley, then went to the Senior Bowl kind of having not played in a year. And I think that had something to do with the fact that he was a little slow at the Senior Bowl. A lot of people wanted to give him credit for showing up. So I'm just letting everyone out there know and understand that I am Team Spencer Brown. I love Spencer Brown before I say this, but if Spencer Brown doesn't look like he's up to snuff, if we get to training camp and that's something that happens, that's one of the things that we observe is, Spencer ain't ready. Then we have to start having the
Pierre popped in the chat.
Yeah.
Pierre popped in the chat.
And we can get to that in a second, Pierre. Then we got to start having the Bobby Hart conversation.
No. I'm having the Ryan Bates conversation before I have the Bobby Hart conversation. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm having the Tommy Doyle conversation before I have this Bobby Hart conversation.
Well, and that's with Tommy Doyle too, because Tommy Doyle apparently in OTAs, according to most of the people who were there, Matt Perino wrote about it, Joe Biscaglia wrote a little bit about it. Tommy Doyle wasn't doing so hot in OTAs with the speed of the game on the outside. So to me, Tommy Doyle is watching his development in the preseason is going to be really fun to see how far he comes in, 4 or 5 months from OTAs to training camp through the preseason. Can he lock down like the 10th offensive line spot if they decide to keep 10th offensive lineman? To me, all eyes on Spencer Brown, because to like that swing tackle position, if is it's scary to me. We had that cozy, warm blanket in the closet in Ty and Seki for 2 years. He ain't there anymore. He's not there anymore. So I
And
might
listen
be
to
a
this.
negative Nancy here, but I'm a little
I
worried.
don't know if I lost. Oh, maybe I'm gone. I'll come back.
Oh, we lost Dave there for a second, it looks like. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that is something that I would be just a tiny bit concerned with. And it looks like, do we got Dave back? We got you back, Dave.
I don't know. I was about to go on a thing about Spencer Brown, and
Yeah, go for it.
I was just gonna say, remember when we drafted Cody Ford and Brandon Bean came out and said in the press conference, we drafted Cody to play tackle. Well, that didn't work out so well. This year, after we drafted Spencer Brown in the 3rd round, after we passed on guys like Ife Melifonwu and others,
Mhm.
Brandon Bean said in the press conference that we expect Spencer Brown to come in here and be our backup swing tackle in 2021. So the expectations have been laid down for Spencer Brown that they as an organization expect him to
Mhm.
be that swing tackle role this year. And to be honest with you, you made some great points. There's not a ton of like you look behind Spencer Brown, like oof, it doesn't look great for that
Mhm.
swing tackle position. And I mean, thinking about it now, you're like, well, the Bills made a smart move by drafting him in the 3rd round to be that swing tackle and potentially your future right tackle. But he's got some pressure on him, even though he's not going
Mhm.
to be a starter this year. At least I'll asterisk that for Pierre because there is a chance, according to
Yeah.
Pierre, that he can be a starter this year.
All right, let's transition now to the defense, and let's talk a little bit of defense here. Let's shift to the defensive line. I think the number one thing on the defensive line that I'm looking at in terms of battles is um, how hungry does these young players make these older players? Whether
Right.
it's Jerry Hughes, whether it's Mario Addison, whether it's Star Latulele, I said it right that time. How does the Vernon Butler? How does the infusion of youth really start to affect the veteran players? We see Star Lotulele looks like he's coming in to camp in some of the best shape of his life. Mario Addison looked slimmed down. Haven't really heard much about Vernon Butler, so it'll be interesting. To me, that's number one thing I'm watching is how are the young guys pushing some of these veteran guys?
Exactly. And no, Pierre, I didn't say you put the pressure on him. I said the organization put the pressure on him. Yes, you're right, because we've talked about this defensive line. I feel like last year we did the same thing. We talked about the defensive line so much, and we're talking about them so much again this year because we feel like maybe we'll get a second chance to redeem ourselves by saying the defensive line will be the deepest group again this year. Vernon Butler, Mario Addison, those guys have to be feeling the pressure a little bit. Now, there's some safety, I think, in their minds because they were both restructured. However, there is a chance still that one of them might be gone. Now, I have to say at this point, I would think that Mario Addison has the leg up on staying
Mhm.
over Vernon Butler. So Vernon Butler is going to be the real key for me as far as like battles and and how I'm watching on the defensive line because in my pre-camp 53, I had him on the roster, and that was caveated by saying, as of today, he's on the roster because of the salary situation. If he doesn't show well in camp,
Mhm.
and guys like Zimmer and maybe even a guy like Obata can come in and rotate in on the interior, it makes things really interesting for a guy like Vernon Butler. And then, like you said, the other big thing I'm going to be looking for is not just the young guys like uh, Basham and Rousseau. Epinesa is the guy for me that I really
Mhm.
want to see how he does this in this camp because he's now a year in, he's now another year in. He's got ideally he's back to the weight he needs to be at, right? I don't know what the
Mhm.
reports are right now of his weight, but I think it sounds like he's probably where he needs to be. And he knows that the Bills just went out and drafted 2 guys uh, in Basham or so because they felt like they still needed edge help. So I think Epinesa's got uh, not a target on his back, but he's got some expectations on him as well. So I'm going to be really,
Yeah.
and I have high hopes for him. I think he will perform, and I'm going to be really anxious to see how he does as well.
I'm going to be oddly analyzing videos and photographs of our defensive linemen to predict how much they weigh. Like that's going to be like part of my weird odd training camp routine this year, because Matthew Fairburn wrote that great piece in The Athletic on he did an in-depth expose on AJ Epinesa, and they said the Buffalo Bills told AJ Epinesa to lose weight, to shed some pounds. He didn't have like NFL trainers with him. He lost too much weight. He was down into the 240s, which is crazy to me. The Buffalo Bills wanted him to get up to 260, 265. When Matthew Fairburn was talking to him, he was still in the 250s, which means he still had another about 10 pounds to add to his frame. So analyzing those photos of AJ Epinesa at training camp is going to be something that I'm probably oddly going to be doing. If you see anyone sneak into One Bills Drive with a scale, that's going to be me. Just a mustache, trench coat, one of those like fisherman hats and a scale. I'm just going to try to trick AJ Epinesa to stepping on it. But yeah, AJ Epinesa, Carlos Basham, Gregory Rousseau. Where do they use Carlos Basham? Like, my thought about Carlos Basham is he's going to be the starting left end, the length and strength left end, while you have guys like Epinesa and Hughes on the right side. And I think Addison will probably wave in on the left side. Daryl Johnson will obviously be there on the left side. So where does Gregory Rousseau land? Do they use Gregory Rousseau solely inside? Do they use Gregory Rousseau at defensive end? Like, how is it that they're going about utilizing Gregory Rousseau? That's going to be something that's going to be fun to watch, and something that's going to be fun to read as we go through training camp. And then the player that I can't get out of my head this offseason is F.A. Obata. I don't know what it is. I'm super excited about F.A. Obata, like just that 6'6", 280-pound frame. The guy who, obviously came from the NFL. Why do I keep screwing this up? But like the foreign player program, international player program, didn't play really any college football. So like the guy's 28 years old and is just now starting to get comfortable with the game. And he's got, the physical attributes that you see in some of the elite defensive like linemen in the National Football League. So it seems like the Buffalo Bills could be striking while the iron's hot on a guy like F.A. Obata. But also, where does he go? Like, where does he play?
Right.
That's going to be like it's so hard to project a roster spot for him right now. So him versus Daryl Johnson is going to be something to keep an eye on. And then that competition then in turn has probably has an effect on whether Mario Addison, the Buffalo Bills, bite the bullet and cut a guy like Mario Addison. So it's pretty crazy. And a couple people coming in here saying I'm looking white as heck. I've given up with lighting in this room. I got a light on me. I got my windows open. It's still only 7:00 in the evening for me. So I got the windows open, the sun shining on my face.
I think you look great.
Thank you.
You look great. Maybe I'm
rocking
just a little tan with the
I'm rocking
beard.
the Edward. I'm rocking the Edward Cullen look. I'm just going to go with the vampire look. I guess the chicks dig that, right? Or was that like 10 years ago? The chicks dig that look.
They did in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe it's coming back into style, Could be.
Yeah. But the defensive line is just F.A. Obata to me is all eyes on Obata for me too. And
he
that
could
sounds
also
weird.
he could also have factor in the defensive tackle competition as well, potentially. Like, that's thing I'm going to be interested as, we talk about all these guys individually, but the mix of, do we even want to like put labels of positions on some of these guys, or do we just consider them as a group? That's kind of what I'm going to be interested to see. Like you mentioned, where are they going to line up Rousseau? Where's Obata going to line up? Like, what are they going to do with Basham? Are we thinking too much about like what position these guys are labeled as, or should we be more thinking about them as a collective group and like what 9 or 10 guys will make it? That I'll be interested in seeing, because, traditionally we've only seen a split of 5 and 4. It's never really been skewed 6-3 one way or the other. So definitely going to be paying attention to that.
Yeah, Dawn's coming in breaking my heart saying she thinks that F.A. Obata is going to get cut, and I just like his name. Maybe.
Pierre asks, is Jerry Hughes a lock?
Yeah.
I say yes. I say
yes too.
Yeah, I think that 4 stone cold locks are Hughes, Epinesa, Basham, and Rousseau. I'm almost ready
And
to
Oliver.
call. Well, at edge, I
Oh,
meant.
at edge. Okay.
I'm almost ready to call. I'm tempted to call Addison a lock. I really am. I don't
Mhm.
think he's going to be cut. I think Addison's going to be on this team. I'll be willing to make a wager
Mhm.
with someone who doesn't think Addison's going to make the team.
Speaking
DM
of
me. I'll make a wager with you.
Yeah, speaking of interior, AK Cash coming in saying he's got a name that not a lot of people in Bills Mafia are talking about in Eli Anku. He says, I'm looking at Vernon Butler versus Eli Anku. Anku won't beat him out because of the money, but he's maybe got that sort of Vincent Taylor effect to his game. I didn't even have Eli Anku really mentioned in the in my notes here. To me, it was my question to you is going to be, it looks almost like I have it parsed in two ways. I have Vernon Butler versus Justin Zimmer for the last defensive tackle spot, with obviously the edge because of the contract going to Vernon Butler. And then I also wanted to talk about Harrison Phillips versus Starlord Olele to see who maybe gets the edge up at the one tech as the guy who gets maybe more of the heavier rotation. But should Harrison Phillips be lumped in with Star as sort of a guy who is a lock, or should Harrison Phillips be in the conversation with Butler and Zimmer as a guy who's still got something to prove to make this roster?
I mean, I don't know how you can look at Harrison Phillips objectively from his play on the field and say that he doesn't have something to prove. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
has something to prove. He's a fan favorite. Don't get me wrong. Everyone's rooting for Harrison Phillips to make the team. He's done everything you've asked for him to do on the
Mm-hmm.
field, off the field. He's been awesome. We all know how when he was drafted, we were like, oh, it was the obvious comparisons were like he could be the next Kyle Williams. All that stuff was talked about, but he really does need to prove it on the field now for me. Like I don't consider Harrison Phillips a lock to make the team.
Mm-hmm.
I expect him to make the team and I think he will make the team, but he's not a lock to me. He's got to prove it in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's got the edge. I do think, obviously the play on the football field is number one, but I do think his effect in the locker room, his effect in the community, I think that does, honest to goodness, I do think that plays a role. Like Ty goes to the Walter Payton Man of the Year, award winner,
Mhm.
things like that. But expiring contract is another thing that you want to talk about. Like, is Harrison Phillips going to be in the long-term plans here if he doesn't pop in training camp? Like, could the Buffalo Bills, could it come down to Harrison Phillips and Justin Zimmer? And they're just like, man, we think Justin Zimmer could be here longer. Like, we're going to go with Zimmer over a guy like Phillips, and you could see a surprise. So that wouldn't shock me as well. So it'd be really interesting to see who's on the first team, who's on the second team, who's showing up at in the games. It'll be really interesting. John comes in and says, I think Harrison is a lock. I don't know that Star is a lock. Harrison has the culture and that sells tickets, brings a lot of money to charities. Management loves that kind of stuff. I think Star's a lot because his contract. I don't think you're getting out of
He
that contract
costs more to
to
cut him than to
cut
keep
and to
him.
keep him.
So,
Yeah.
you're right about it, Harrison. Though I mean, it's tough because again,
Mm,
you're as a fan and you're rooting for him. Like
yeah.
there is no bone in my body that's not rooting for him. It's just if you look at it from a pure football standpoint, he's gotta reprove it, right? Ombre Lob says Phillips is doing all right before
Mhm,
the injury. Want him to get some viciousness to him. We need some pit bulls to tear up offensive lines, and he was that 1 or 2 games or whatever. Was it the
mhm,
Giants game? I think that he got injured the second game of the year, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was the Bengals game. Either way, it was like the
mhm,
second or third game of the year. But honestly, like he's got to prove it again. Like because rookie year he didn't do a ton. He was
mhm.
looking good those first couple, but like what
It
has he
all it
really done?
it all clicked for him, and then he tore his ACL,
Yep.
and now he's 2 years removed from that. So it's do or die time for a guy like Harrison Phillips, and all of this where we could have again. We get to training camp, we get to preseason. The reports could easily be, "Oh, Harrison Phillips looks great." 2 years removed from that ACL, he looks totally comfortable. He's pushing the pocket back. Harrison
Mhm.
Phillips looks like an absolute monster out there. Those could be
Yep.
the headlines that we see. Like just
Yep.
as easily as we see the other one, those could be the headlines that we see as well. We got Ryan Teal coming in saying, let's get 50 more likes. I like it with the super chat there. I like the what's what I'm looking for? I like the lofty goal there. 50 more likes. We got 102 people in here. So get us to 102 likes, ladies and gentlemen. That would be truly great. We would truly appreciate that. As always, helps us with the algorithm, helps us stay relevant, helps my narcissistic ass get in front of as many faces as possible. So we really do truly appreciate it. And thank you, Ryan, for the super chat, by the way. Vincent Joseph, that was the next thing I want to talk about. So perfect segue here from Vincent Joseph. Ed Oliver needs to show up like a top 10 pick this year. And everyone is saying, listen, Star Lotulele's back. Ed Oliver doesn't need to play the one tech anymore. I think now, just like Dawson Knox versus expectations, we got Ed Oliver versus expectations as well this year. What are your thoughts on Ed Oliver?
I agree, but I also feel like Oliver has played pretty well his first 2 years. So I'm not. I expect him. I think the difference between Dawson Knox and Ed Oliver is like there's a question: can Dawson Knox do it? I think for Ed Oliver, I'm really expecting him to, and I guess that's the difference between a top 10 pick and a guy you picked in the third round that didn't have a ton of experience at the position. I know Ed Oliver was playing a little bit out of position last year. He did flash as a rookie, and he still played pretty well last year, I thought. So to me, I think getting Star back there is going to help. I think the whole defensive line probably has a chip on their shoulder after probably feeling like they all underperformed a bit last year, regardless of whether Star was there or not. The defensive line's got pride, and we know Sean McDermott is going to get whatever pride he's got out of the guys on that defensive line. It's going to come out this year because he knows he knows it wasn't what they wanted last year. So I expect Ed to be a big factor this year, and I expect him to have a good season.
Yeah, we got Kendall coming in saying Ed hugging Star when he came back illustrates that he acknowledges that this is the year to prove he's not a bust. And here's the thing, though, like I don't think Ed Oliver has lived up to top 10 pick status. Obviously, like he hasn't been, an all pro type of player or even a Pro Bowl type of player, but he has been you mentioned a good football player. But this is now the time to go from good to great. Like this is the time to go from, Josh Allen in his second year to Josh Allen in his third year. Like let's go and let's get that play from Ed Oliver that puts him over the top. And that's why my eyes are going to be on Ed Oliver too. And one of the things that I want to see from Ed Oliver is he was such a fiery player in college. And you saw a little bit of that fire in the Dallas game his rookie year. I don't want to say that fire was gone last year, but I just didn't see that sort of I don't want to say like it was gone like he was out there jogging or anything, but like just something like that confidence wasn't there last year. And I think a lot of that might have had to do with Star Lotulelei. So I think that you're going to see a lot more of an animated Ed Oliver this year with a guy he's more comfortable with next to him in Star Lotulelei. I think you're going to see a lot more cocky Ed Oliver. I think you're going to see a lot more like just animated Ed Oliver, a guy who's a lot more confident in himself this year. So him versus his expectations should be interesting. Speaking of a player versus his expectations, Tremaine Edmonds. All eyes are going to be on him this training camp. 23 years old, calls all the plays on the defense. He's the guy, the general in charge, moving guys around, doing all those things. Obviously, he has help from guys like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, but he is the primary play caller. All eyes are going to be on Tremaine Edmonds this year. I kind of want to see. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some headlines like, Tremaine Edmonds pops. Tremaine Edmonds does this. I'm hoping to start seeing his name involved more in flash plays, because to me, if you start seeing his name more involved in flash plays, it means that the game is slowing down for him and he's able to start to make some of those moves. I don't know. What are you looking for, in a guy like Tremaine Edmonds this year?
Yeah, I want to see the splash plays, yes, but I want to see a little bit more instinctual play out of him. I want to see less reacting, or I mean, it's all about reacting, but I guess quicker reaction times, more decisiveness, flowing to the ball. I think that all of these factors around him playing injured last year, him coming back and finally kind of getting over the mental hurdle of that shoulder injury, playing a position where you're basically banging that shoulder. It's like the running back equivalent on defense. You're banging into people on every play. And like you said, 23 years old. I mean, eventually there's going to come a point where we can't say, hey, he's a young player anymore. this seems like a perfect opportunity for him this year. Put all that stuff behind him. Know that you finished the season pretty well last year. Not, not awesome, but pretty well.
Mhm.
And say, this is my year to really take that step heading into my, my 4th year along with Josh. So I'm with you. I do want to see a few more flashy plays, but I think
Mhm.
that if we just see a lot more solid play out of him, especially when it comes to finishing tackles and finishing tackles downhill, I want to see more of that out of Tremaine. If he comes up and makes solid play after solid
Mhm.
play, tackles, form tackles, in the backfield, I don't necessarily need him to make the pick six or the big sack if he's doing that. So
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking for, from him. I think that going into his 4th year, he's also got a lot of pressure on him because we know that there are plenty of Tremaine Edmonds detractors out there. So
Mhm.
for him as well, he's got to feel like this is a time he needs to step up.
Now, let me know what you think on this point too, because this sort of just hit me as you were talking here. It seems to me like when our defense is doing well, Tremaine Edmonds gets a lot of credit. 23-year-old play caller, leader of this defense, future of this team. When our defense is not doing so well, it's like, oh, he's a minute late reacting to this. This is why our run game is playing awful and it's throwing our whole defense apart. Or he can't, cover a tight end, blah blah blah. Like it seems like when the defense is playing poorly, a lot of the blame is shouldered on Tremaine Edmonds. When the defense is playing well, a lot of the success is placed on the shoulder of Tremaine Edmonds. Do you think like as the defense goes, our sort of or at least the general consensus of Tremaine Edmonds goes?
I think I think so, but I think it's unfair. I think to
Mhm.
me to me the key to this whole defense really is the defensive line and especially
Mhm.
the interior. I think that the interior defensive line really is going to set the tone for each group back from it, right? Like defensive line plays well, I think Tremaine Edmonds will play better. I think the secondary will look better. Obviously, with the pass rush getting to the quarterback quicker, the secondary is not going to have to cover as long. So Randy says maybe all he is an above average middle linebacker. Is that such a terrible thing? No, it's not.
Nope.
It's not. I mean, the guy was he the 16th overall pick, I believe.
17th, I believe. I could be wrong.
16 or
16
17th
or
overall
17, yeah.
pick. And at the time we drafted him, he was what, 19 years old.
Mhm.
So if he's an above average middle linebacker at age 22, age 23, I'm quite happy with that. If he
Mhm.
can blossom into more, great. But what I think you've seen out of the Bills draft picks, at least to this point, outside of Josh Allen, who obviously hit for Bean, a large majority of Bean's draft picks have been solid, if yet not spectacular players.
Mhm.
Outside of Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, solid, not spectacular. Ed Oliver, solid, maybe not spectacular. Right? That's be kind of that's kind of becoming what we, I think, forget about Bean's draft picks because of Josh Allen. Now, Gabriel Davis, he could end up being spectacular. Like, so it's okay for guys to be solid. You want them to contribute. If you're missing on all these picks and like Tremaine
Mhm.
Edmonds was flaming out after a year or two, then you'd have issues. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with where he is right now.
Yeah. Someone said, who said that? Two-time Pro Bowler, not where Chris says. Two-time Pro Bowler, not worried.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just going to more in depth, sort of transitioning from Tremaine Edmonds now. The talk of linebacker, I think, this offseason outside of Tremaine Edmonds has been all right. Tyrell Adams put up some really good box score statistics in Houston. Tyrell Dodson flashed pretty well in some of the games he played for Matt Milano. I think the Miami game week 2 really sticks out. So you got AJ Klein on this roster, who obviously everyone in Bills Mafia detested. Then the Seattle game happened, and then he sort of won
Yes.
everyone over. But I think one of the things that you want to watch this training camp, or one of the battles I want to watch, is obviously Tyrell Adams and Tyrell Dodson are fighting for roster positions. We have depth for the first time. Guys like Joe Giles Harris, guys like Markel Lee are also in contention as well. So it'll be interesting to see these linebackers competing for a job. We've pretty much been on the Adams and Dodson train, but I also want to throw the name Andre Smith in there as well, because, I'm beating a dead horse here when I talk about the Buffalo Bills having time to develop guys and the Buffalo Bills investing time in players, whether it be Antonio Williams, Ike Butker, Ryan Bates, like some of these guys they've invested time in. Traded a 7th round pick, draft capital for Andre Smith, invested a whole year in him, re-upped him. So we look at Andre Smith as a special teams only player, but watching Andre Smith to see if he can give you some defensive pop is another thing to look for in training camp. Because if Andre Smith starts popping on defense, then he jumps into the Adams and Dodson conversation. So it should be interesting. And Randy comes in and says, I'm the only one who thinks that Joe Giles Harris is a shot. He played some quality minutes for Jacksonville last year. Yes, Jacksonville had a garbage defense, just like Houston had a garbage defense, but he's got NFL experience, and that says something, especially when you're in training camp, fighting for a roster spot. So, he popped enough in the rookie camp to get a roster spot. So now let's see if he can pop in training camp. So, it'll be really, it's just fun having names to talk about, like that are good, like that are decent young prospect players, guys who played in this league and flashed a little bit of something. Like it's better than talking about who is it? The safety that Maurice Alexander that we converted to linebacker, and the CFLers. Who's the CFL guy? I'm forgetting now. Number 44. What was his name? I'm blanking. Deion Lacey. Yep. So it's more fun to talk about these guys than it was to talk about those guys. It's going to be more fun to watch and analyze these guys than it was to watch and analyze those guys. What are your thoughts about the depth that we now have at the linebacker position?
I like the fact that we have guys that, although they're likely to be special teamers, have defensive experience. Guys like Adams, Lee, Giles Harris, Andre Smith.
Did you know Giles Harris played lacrosse at Duke?
I know. I did not know that.
I'm going to say that every show now. I'm just be like, hey, every time Joe Giles Harris is mentioned, I'll be like, hey, do you know he played lacrosse?
The Duke lacrosse team doesn't exactly have the best reputation. So as we know from history, in any case, Tyrell Adams, interesting. I think Markel Lee maybe is a guy we should be talking about a little bit more, maybe even more than Andre Smith. But again, like you said, these are guys. How many of these 1-year deal type guys are going to make it? We know Matakevich is probably locked in as the special teamer. So a guy like Adams, who played a lot of defensive snaps last year for Houston, as well as special team snaps, becomes very intriguing to me. Smith, to me, like if they keep 6 linebackers, he might have a shot. But to be honest with you, I'd rather keep a guy like Dodson. For me, I'd rather keep Dodson and Adams and then have Matakevich be kind of the pure special teamer, because now that Adams can play special teams as well. And Dodson, I think, gives you a little more. He's a guy that as you mentioned, we've developed, we've put time in developing. So I think guys like Lee and Smith are probably on the outside looking in, but you never know. Yeah. They could just cut bait with Adams, which would be a surprise, but it could happen.
But that's the thing. You get to training camp, right? You get to training camp, and all of a sudden you're reading an article saying this Tyrell Adams guy is just a tad late on all these plays. He's not what we thought he was, blah, blah, blah. And then you're reading about how Tyrell Dodson is making flash plays all over the field, how Joe Giles Harris is flashing. These are the things that, like, it's just sort of a throwaway when you say it in June or like even May or July. It's just sort of like, oh, okay, you're just throwing a good fly against the wall and see if it sticks. But then you get to training camp, it's no longer just a fly against the wall. It's like, no, look, Joe Giles Harris did this, and this today. Tyrell Dodson did this today, and Tyrell Adams was invisible. Like, so that's going to be the really interesting thing to watch when it comes to training camp. All right. Last thing we need to touch upon here, and then we'll bring Kendall out and do a little bit of Q&A before we go. Levi Wallace versus Dane Jackson. Is this really a competition, or is this something we as Bills fans have all made up in our heads?
No, I mean, it's a competition. Levi Wallace has been in the competition for his job like every year he's been on the team, and he keeps fending people off. Like, this is one of the this is going to be one of the most scrutinized competitions of training camp. And I think it has to be, right? It goes back to the fact that in free agency, the Bills didn't bring in a corner. In the draft, they didn't draft a cornerback high like a lot of us were, hoping and or expecting.
Mhm.
And so outside of drafting Wild Goose late and some UDFAs, which I know Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace are those guys, late round
Mhm.
and UDFA
Mhm.
type guys, they have to be the ones that are opening camp as the CB2 competition. So yes, it is a real competition.
Mhm.
Bean went out of his way to mention Dane Jackson by name in the offseason. So Chris says CB2 could be like a RB2 by committee. They did that with Josh
Uh,
Norman and Levi Wallace
yeah.
last year. So
Mhm.
the Bills have shown they are willing to do a rotation at CB2. So
And
it could end up being like running back one. Like,
mhm.
does it really matter who it is? It could just be a rotation. We'll see. But
And
it's going to be fun.
this is really interesting too, because I think that Dane Jackson, whether he starts or not, I think he's going to be a really important player to this defense because he's the dime defender. He would be, if he loses out to Levi Wallace, he's the dime defender, not a dime defender in the sense that the Bills are going to run out, four corners, but sort of like that sixth man sort of thing. Like, because Dane Jackson's got the physicality where he could play nickel. So if Teron Johnson gets hurt, Dane Jackson can go in and he could play the nickel. If Levi Wallace gets hurt, obviously Dane Jackson can go in and play corner. If something, knock on wood again, happens to Trey White, you would think that like Dane Jackson is really the only true boundary guy, unless Rashad Wildgoose's development skyrockets or we sign someone, which with Steven Nelson signing today, looking unlikely. Dane Jackson becomes, even if he's not starting, becomes a vital guy because he's that first guy off the bench and he's got that inside outside versatility. But the Buffalo Bills could just play matchups this year at CB2, right?
Mhm.
Like if there's a team with like sort of maybe like a weaker wide receiver two, and the Buffalo Bills are going to play a lot of zone, you could see Levi Wallace start. Where the next week they're playing a bigger bodied wide receiver number two, or a guy who's really physical, or they have they're playing against a running back like Derrick Henry and they want a cornerback who's really physical and aggressive at the line of scrimmage, a guy who can get in there and get physical with running backs. Dane Jackson starts this week. So like you could see a situation where CB2 flips week to week depending on the matchup, which is not something I think that you see a lot in the National Football League. And it almost feels like that's something like, I don't think the Buffalo Bills were doing that last year with the way that they were moving Levi Wallace and Josh Norman in and out. I don't think
Mhm.
that it was so much of I don't think it was so much like what I just described, but I think that it sort of set the table to where I can envision what I just described happening, where they play the matchups and change the guys who are starting maybe on a week to week basis, depending on that matchup. So yeah, it could be a committee approach as Chris says right here too. So it should be real interesting. The depth of defense I wanted to talk about too. So Buffalo Bills run a lot of nickel, most nickel in the league. You'd expect them probably to go back to a little bit more of a base approach this year too, with all the bodies they have up front. Dean Marlowe played 200 some odd snaps last year. When Matt Milano was hurt, or whether it was Micah Hyde who was hurt, whoever was down, it was Dean Marlowe who filled that void. Obviously, if a corner goes down, Dane Jackson's the first one up. Like that's pretty obvious to me. But if a Micah Hyde or a Jordan Porter go down, or we need to put that third safety into the game, that Dean Marlowe is gone. So Damar Hamlin, Jaquan Johnson, those are some of the names that we've been talking about. But are we sleeping on other guys like Josh Thomas, who's been here a year now, UDFA out of Appalachian State, and also, Tariq Thompson, a guy who we both liked in the pre-draft process. These are all 6th, 7th round picks and UDFAs. Do the 6th and the 7th round picks really have that big of an advantage over the UDFA guys? Because we like to talk about Jaquan and Damar. We hardly ever talk about Tariq and Josh.
I mean, I gotta think Jaquan has some kind of leg up, just given that he's been with the team
Mhm.
for a couple years now. And even though he hasn't played a ton of defensive snaps, he's played a lot of special teams. And the Bills have kept him, they've kept him on the 53 every year so far. So given the inexperience, like you said, with Marlowe gone, Hamlin a rookie, Tariq Thompson a UDFA, Josh Thomas not really any experience, a ton of experience. I mean, Jaquan Johnson has to feel like looking around, like as long as I am competent during training camp, I probably have a pretty good chance to make this team. I think Damar Hamlin as a
Mhm.
6th round draft pick, I feel like although we shouldn't put a ton of stock into the fact that he was a 6th round pick and it was a late round pick, I do think he has a leg up because again, these other guys were UDFAs. Hamlin, this is my personal lead. I think he should have been higher than a 6th round draft pick. I thought he probably should have been 5th round, maybe late 4th. I think he's the Dane Jackson of safeties. I said that many times. He can do a little bit of everything. He's solid. He can cover. He can tackle. He's just an all-around player. So to me, there's no glaring deficiency in DeMar Hamlin's game outside of maybe some top end speed. But we don't really have that with any of the guys in the mix there anyway. So for me, Hamlin, I think he's got a leg up. So for now, I'm saying Hamlin and Jaquan would probably be the 2 guys I'd give the leg up.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to count out guys like Tariq Thompson, because this is one of those positions where we've said in the past, it's one of those path of least resistance. This and maybe tight end, where you could see guys who in a normal circumstance wouldn't really have a chance to make the team, but given the depth is relatively unproven, they could have a chance.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, it's just, to me, it's so wide open, the depth, because even if you look at it at the cornerback position too, Rashad Wildgoose, sort of a project player. Everyone thought he should have gone back to Wisconsin, continued to develop under Jim Leonard there. He's got sort of like the speed and everything, but not a lot of playing time at Wisconsin. You got McLeod. You have Elijah Griffin. You even have Cam Lewis. So there's just such a plethora of young, interesting players at corner and safety. And with Dean Marlowe out, like, there could be a shakeup at the bottom half of the secondary roster, because, I mean, outside of Hyde, Poyer, Teron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace, Trey White, 6 guys. Those are only 3 locks, or those are only 6 locks. That leaves 3, possibly 4 guys, and it's going to be a dogfight to see who can get those spots. I'm with you. I would give guys like Wild Goose, Hamlin, and Johnson the leg up, but I just look at it too. Like, I just want to give a special shout out here to Cam Lewis, my guy from the University of Buffalo. Cam Lewis is going to end up on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. There's going to be an injury sometime in the middle of the season. Cam Lewis is going to get called up. He's going to be on the active roster. He's going to play a football game, and you're going to have no idea he's there. And I mean that in a really good way. You're going to have no idea Cam Johnson was starting that game. You'll be like, wow, Cam Johnson went up there and did absolutely, or Cam Lewis went out there and did absolutely nothing. Great. He didn't get beat. Like, that's what he did. Like he that's just the kind of player he is. And I really like the fact that they have players like that on the bottom half of that roster. Yeah.
I hope my NC State guy McLeod makes the practice squad.
Over the son of Elijah Griffin, who's the son of I don't know his name.
Warren G.
Yeah, Warren G.
I have no allegiance to USC. I mean, why would I, right? Like, my allegiance will be to my Wolfpack alum there, McLeod.
All right, that is it. We have made our way through the entire roster. I think the one thing I forgot to talk about was the Buffalo Bills worked out Joshua Perkins at tight end today, which also goes back to my point that tight end number 3 is an absolute free-for-all. It's not a lock for Tommy Sweeney. It's not a lock for Reggie Gilliam. I think guys like Nate Becker, I think guys like Quentin Morris have just as much of a shot as a guy that they could sign off the street a week from now. Tight end 3 is up for grabs. And we didn't address, obviously, kicker and punter. What are you guys' thoughts on not having a camp leg? I think it's good. I think Tyler Bass and Matt Hawk need all the reps they can get, Dave. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Bass is a second-year player. Like, just give him all the reps. Like, he's your kicker.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to have a camp leg because, like, there's no competition for that spot. So let Bass, as a second-year guy who didn't get preseason last year, pretty much his only reps were regular season kicks. I mean, obviously the playoffs help getting a few extra kicks there too. But, yeah, get just doesn't matter. Give Bass all the reps.
All right,
yeah.
So
wait, I actually wanted to ask you guys if you remember what's his name? I think his last name was Carter. He was like a backup punter, and I think he was competing with
Corey Carter.
Was it Corey Carter? He was competing with Bojo for the punter gig, like I think 2 years ago.
Yeah. He was all about Corey Carter.
Yeah, dude.
I was too.
When we first started our podcast, he he like retweeted a poll where we're like, who's gonna be the next punter of the Buffalo Bills or something like that.
I low-key want to
so
give Matt Hawk some competition, so I'd love to bring Carter back because I thought he was good in that preseason, and then of course he gets injured. So I mean, that's my 2 cents on a camp like.
Someone in the comment section will probably mention Marquette King.
That's true.
I just want my punter to be able to hold decently well. I actually don't even care at this point if they can punt well.
Listen to the Nap Nose Buffalo pod because apparently holding is more to do with the long snapper than the punter itself.
That's
my promo.
We were the original Reed Ferguson interview like a year ago. We know all about the intricacies of long snapping.
I think his comment was, "No one's ever asked me this much about long snapping before." I'm like,
yes.
Okay. All right. So in the comment section, Dawn said she had a question about Deshaun Watson. Throw it in there and we'll get to it. But while we get to that and any other questions that anyone might have or topics that people might want to talk about, Kendall, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to, either battles or just players you want to look at? What are you looking forward to this training camp?
I'm looking forward to Tariq Thompson making the 53-man roster. That's like the hill I'm dying on right now because it's probably the hottest take. No, I'm really excited for like all the little camp battles. Definitely back end of the wide receiver room. Honestly, I think I'm really excited to see how the waiver claiming system goes. I'm really curious to see if we'll be able to get Stevenson on the practice squad. I'm curious if Tommy Doyle is going to make this final roster. I've made a statement saying I think the Buffalo Bills are a little bit higher on him because of that connection with Miami of Ohio with Bobby Johnson. I think the Bills are higher on him than the rest of the NFL. So I'm curious if we kind of overdrafted him and maybe someone like Ryan Bates makes the final roster and that allows Tommy Doyle to sneak onto the practice squad. There's a lot of little nuances to this roster that I'm excited to see, but yeah, it's tough to really peg one of them. So I'm just going to stand my guy, Tariq Thompson.
Number one has to be for me the kink return, punt return.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even over CB2, even over left guard. Like that's what I'm most interested.
And who knows?
That will have a knock-on effect potentially on if we keep 7 receivers, and then that could then domino into where we maybe don't keep a 10th lineman, or we do keep a 10th lineman because we don't have to keep an extra receiver. Like,
right.
It's a big factor for the rest of the roster.
And Pierre even comes in here, and who knows? We could be talking about punter like 3 weeks from now because, could Boji be missed? We had the number 1 punter in yards in the NFL. We'll miss that leg. We're just assuming that we upgraded a guy like Matt Hawk. Here's the thing: like,
I'm not assuming we upgraded.
It wasn't. I just kind of don't care, but like, I also don't care because it's the off season. Like, but here we were during the regular season the past 2 years, like, get this dude off our football field in Corey Bojorquez. Right. Like, we were hitting the panic button every week on punters.
We're furious. Yeah. The first time he shanks the
first time he shanks a punt, which is what he's known for shanking.
Yeah.
He's a coffin corner guy who's known for shanking. Like,
it doesn't make sense.
And that's his rep. He's a really good holder. When he's on in terms of coffin corner. Doesn't have as big a leg as Bojo. But what's the one downside to him that I see in every single scouting report and every single article? Dude has an issue with shanks. And we even saw it in the McKenzie punt return. He let that ball hang way too long.
Pretty sure he had a couple other shanks in that game regardless.
Didn't let it hang. Sorry. Didn't let the ball hang too long. That's a good thing. Didn't let it hang long enough. I don't know. Anyway, we're done talking punters.
It was a line drive punt. You want your coverage unit to have time to come down.
Yes, there you go.
And cover, and he did not give him enough time.
All right. So, anyone in the comment section have anything they want to throw at us? I know Dawn said she wanted to talk about.
You seeing this from Pierre? Oh, poor guy. I've already flip-flopped him on Spencer Brown. I hope that's not true, Pierre. Stand your man. Stay with Spencer Brown. I just personally don't think he's starting caliber yet. With that being said, the tape I watched was 2 years ago. Like, the dude could have improved. Like, I'm watching 2019 tape.
So that's the thing with Spencer Brown. I said it kind of quickly earlier because it wasn't the point I was trying to make. I was trying to make the point that, like, what if he sucks? But so he played at Northern Iowa. Like, obviously he's a freak physically, like 6'9", 315, absolute unicorn in terms of his athleticism. Didn't play an entire year. And you're like, well, he played an entire year and he worked out with Joe Staley of all people that entire year. So he got a year of like almost practically one-on-one coaching with one of the better offensive tackles of the past, 2 decades in the National Football League in Joe Staley. That was really valuable time for him. Like they mentioned how he could have gone and played somewhere else. He didn't want to leave his teammates. That was something that really drew the Buffalo Bills to him. He wanted to stay with his team in case something happened. He didn't want to just leave them to go for another D1 opportunity that he could have had. He worked one-on-one with Joe Staley. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and you're like, well, he's worked this whole year with Joe Staley. He should get to the Senior Bowl, and he should look awesome. And he didn't.
He was rusty for sure in this.
But that's the
like
thing,
not
like,
even a question.
That's the rust factor.
Mhm.
So everyone's like, well, he went and worked with Joe Staley, and then he looked like shit at the Senior Bowl. It's like, well, he also hadn't played in a year, and some of these guys had played.
Exactly.
Like some of these guys were just coming off of a 10-game season. They were fresh. They were in a groove. They had game experience. And he's coming out there probably having just spent an entire year doing one-on-one drills with Joe Staley.
Yeah, like Joe Staley isn't a retired defensive end. He's a retired offensive tackle. So it's not like he's even getting like quality reps in that kind of one-on-one environment. But he is getting a lot of good, like, insights. But
Yeah. So it should be really interesting. I know the Buffalo Bills mentioned the fact that he didn't leave his team as something that really drew them to him. And the fact that he went out there and gutted through the Senior Bowl, even though it made him look bad because the other guys were more seasoned and conditioned than he was. He went out there and looked bad, but he wanted to be out there in front of the scouts. So who knows? Now that he has the OTAs, now that he gets through a couple of weeks of training camp, maybe we start to see it all start to come together for the physical freak that is Spencer Brown, because I've mentioned on a number of occasions, I just think he has such a freak athletic ability that he can learn on the fly. Like he can be like Jason Peters. Like he doesn't need to like really have the need to sit for an extended period of time. If called upon, I think he can learn on the fly, and he has the athletic ability to sort of make up for what he might lack in terms of being a tactician.
We got a question here coming in from Jay Davis. Says, with Rousseau being an outside body, Rush is better inside, and Basham the opposite, how are they going to work on their moves, focus on what they're good at, or teach them new moves? Well, I think the early parts of camp are probably going to be to figure out, in my estimation, they would put them where they're good at first to start camp, right? Give them some reps at somewhere where they feel most comfortable. I think that Rousseau is going to be a bit of a wild card because obviously he didn't play in 2020. So you're kind of just, it's a little bit of a crapshoot with Rousseau, but you're probably going to start him on the outside, I would imagine. And I actually think you're probably going to start with both guys on the outside. That would be my guess. You're going to start with both on the outside, not try to put too much on them, and then see where it goes from there. You've got enough, I think, early in camp that you need to try to see out of your defensive tackles, whether it's Zimmer, Phillips, Butler, Obata, if he's rotating inside, because we know he's like, let those guys start on the outside, probably where they're most comfortable. If they're going to work on some inside pass rush moves, fine. But I think lining up wise, they probably would start lining up on the edge would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just going to see a ton of stunts from the Buffalo Bills this year, like situations where Rousseau starts on the edge but ends up rushing from the inside, or situations where he's on the inside but ends up rushing from the outside. Like, I just think the Buffalo Bills, A gap, B gap blitzes, stunts. I think they're going to be throwing a whole bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks in terms of trying to wreak havoc on quarterbacks this year. And that's going to be the really exciting thing. Like, this is cautious optimism because Sean McDermott has been a rep, like Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, like their rep is they're more conservative. Do your 111th, like, everybody be in the right place. They're not the flashiest guys on defense. I think you're going to see a slight shift in philosophy, and I think they're going to try to get a little flashier this year.
Judge, I'll lean into that 100%. I think you're right. Like, I 100% agree with you. We've talked about this idea that they're going to lean into the NASCAR package that the Giants did, the forest among the trees thing, whatever the saying that we've been talking about is. But I think they're going to do a lot of standing up people on this front, and they're not going to have people like pigeonholed at 3 tech, 1 tech, and they're going to stand guys up, and they're going to have movable pieces. We talk about how the safeties love to disguise coverage. I think we're going to disguise our fronts and our blitz packages like crazy this year. And because of that, it'll make it easier to stunt. I just really hope we don't do stunts to the same side that Starlo Tulele's on, because I don't want him going all the way around the edge. It's just a waste of time.
He lost some weight. He's looking
I don't
good.
care, Judge. It's not going to work.
We got Ambre Loud coming in saying, who's someone that no one is expecting to make a starter position that just might end up being a starter? All three can answer if you want. I'll start, and I'm going to sort of take the I'm going to take a
Boy.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. The one player I think could end up starting that no one expects, I'm going to go with Brandon Powell as your kicking punt.
Bastard, you stole mine.
I don't know how much.
Like,
of
what
that's
else is
cheating,
there? I
though.
mean, this is a
Yeah.
team that brought.
Ike Buckner, maybe at left guard.
Yeah,
Could
but like,
end up being-
I'm trying to think of like something that would surprise people. Maybe Gregory Rousseau starting, like, because
All right, I got one. The Bills this offseason have said that they have an eye on now and the future. Could Harrison Phillips start at one tech over Star? Because that would have an eye towards the future, because the future one tech is not Star. And I don't know if it's necessarily Harrison, but there's more of a chance for that future to be Harrison Phillips.
He's on the last year of his deal too, so
he is. So they might as well get as much as they can out of him and figure it out if he's going to be re-signed.
And listen, I know that some people really do think that these guys have a chance, and maybe they do. Christian Wade and Duke Williams. I mean, have we?
He's checked out. Look at that. He's done.
We have officially hit that part of the show, ladies and gentlemen. But that was a great question. I mean, because this team is just, it's been, and Namdi threw out F.A. Obata. So I think in a perfect world, to me, it would be Hughes and Epinesa on the right side. It would be Basham and Obata on the left side. And Gregory Rousseau would be the wild card. And a guy like Mario Addison would be off the roster. Obviously, Daryl Johnson's not in that mix as well, which hurts my soul a little bit, but it is what it is. Get those power players, those length and strength guys on the left side. Get those speed rushers now. AJ Epinesa is, I think, a speed rusher now, or could be considered a speed rusher now because he's lost all that weight. So, maybe like I think when the Buffalo Bills go to play the Pittsburgh Steelers week 1 and CBS throws up their graphic of starters, it's going to be left to right, Jerry Hughes, Starlo Tulele, at Oliver, Mario Addison.
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, right to left. That doesn't necessarily mean that Mario Addison's starting because it could be Boogie Basham. It could be F.A. Obata. And Mario Addison doesn't come in until third down. But because Mario Addison is the veteran, they give him the graphic. You know what I'm saying? So it should be interesting. It should be real interesting there. Chris S. coming in with a question. You want to read it?
Yeah, he says, what's one thing opposing DCs are going to try to take away from our offense this year? I think, I think that, well, I was going to say maybe there'll be more spying on Allen this year, allowing less improvisational runs out of Allen would be something I'd try to prevent if I was a DC, because if you look at his biggest chunk run plays, they're pretty much all on, I don't want to call them broken plays, but they're not design run plays, right?
Off
They're
the script.
They're off script run plays. You're going to have to pick your poison, though, if you're an opposing, defense in that regard, because then the middle of the field maybe becomes a little more open. Guys like Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley, and even guys like Dawson Knox can work that. So, yeah, that's probably what I'm doing, because it's funny that we've gotten to the point now with the Bills offense where it's like, if you try to take one thing away, they can hurt you with others. Like, that used to not be the case. It used to be like the Bills could kind of do one thing well, and that was like run the ball. So it was like, if you took away their run game, they were pretty much screwed. So I would say keep Allen contained on off script run plays.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things I was thinking. The only concern, I was going to say two things. The only concern with that is you keep one guy as a spy. You're taking one guy out of coverage, and Allen will just eat up. With his arm strength, he will find a hole in the coverage, and he will do that. I think the Bills are going to, or the way teams are going to combat the Bills offense is going to be taking away the deep passing and see if Josh Allen is okay dumping it down to the easy check down options, because he's shown he does do that, but he doesn't want to do that. And I think teams are going to try to force him to do that more than he's comfortable with.
That's a good one too. Don coming to the super chat, and Dread Ocean, we're going to get to your comment as well, because that's a good one. with Watson reporting to camp on Wednesday and the Texans looking to trade him, who would touch him with those 22 civil cases and 10 criminal cases? I'm on record as saying that I don't think Deshaun Watson plays a snap of football in 2022. Or, in 2021. I think he reports to Texans training camp. I think he might do a couple of practices here and there. I think by the time the season rolls around, he gets placed on some kind of investigation list and he's not allowed to play. I don't think he ever plays another down for the Texans. And I think that once the dust settles and there's some time, like it is like let the legal process play out, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get into like, do I believe him or this or that or this or that? But we've all seen players like this beat the rap on things like this before, even if they were guilty. So like you could see Deshaun Watson settle this if he did do it. You could see him settle this thing, distance himself for a year being out of the limelight, and then being traded to a team like the Dolphins next offseason and it just being a fresh start and everyone, forgetting about it. Like people forgot about what Mike Vick did and all that kind of stuff. So, it should be interesting, but I'm on record saying I don't think he plays it down this year. And I think he ends up with the Miami Dolphins in 2022. What do you guys think about Deshaun Watson? It's a lot to wrap your head around there.
I'm with you on your thoughts that he's probably not going to play this year, but I'm also just hoping Tua is just good enough that they don't make that trade for Deshaun Watson. Yeah. I don't want him anywhere near this division.
Send him to Denver. I mean, just send him somewhere. Send him somewhere else.
Yeah, that way him and the Chiefs can beat up on each other.
Yeah. Dried Ocean comes in and says, where does Epinesa come into the equation? I think he's the number 2 right end behind Jerry Hughes, and I think next year he'll be the number 1 right end. But like I'm on record too saying I think AJ Epinesa plays the early downs, the first and the seconds, and Jerry Hughes comes in, pins his earbacks on those passing downs. So it'll be really interesting to see what do you guys have any differing opinions on AJ Epinesa here?
You've convinced me on that. Yeah. No, I 100%.
Which means I'm probably going to be dead wrong. And someone's going to clip it and just.
You're on record with a lot of things, by the way.
It's been a
long off season.
We do 2 shows a week, 12 months a year. Like in June and July, I'm going to say some stupid shit. And then someone's gonna clip it and be like, Judge is an idiot.
Judge,
like,
this is why I timestamp so everyone can go back and they can check what you're wrong and you're right about. That's the value of my timestamping.
It was June 24th. There was nothing to talk about, and I was 6 beers deep. Of course, I'm going to say Nate Becker has a chance to make this roster. Like, what do you expect from me? Like,
I mean, it's fair. That's fair.
No, it's fair. It's 100% fair.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that should just about do it for this evening. Want to Judge Coward. Want to thank you guys so much. Like I said, I don't think I'm a flip flopper. I don't know if I'm a flip flopper.
You're
I would not
you're not a flip flopper, but you're like semi indecisive with your takes. You don't always fully agree with them, and you'll definitely dig your heels in at one point. It just kind of takes you a bit.
Yeah.
You also convince yourself to change your mind.
Exactly.
I think out loud.
The indecision.
But that's my thing is like, I think out loud. So like people tell me all the time, like, man, you put your foot in your mouth a lot. And I'm just like, that's just who I am. Like I get in trouble for it all the time. I think out loud. Like other people, think in their heads and then they say things that sound smart and intelligent. I say a lot of stupid shit and then eventually something smart comes out. Like that's how I function. Like that's just how I roll.
And we're all better for it. We're all better for it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today is Monday. So you will see us again on Thursday. Obviously stick with Buffalo Fanatics every night on YouTube. We got our live shows rolling.
Is Rico back tomorrow?
I was just going to ask.
Pierre, Bobby, anyone got any? I got people sending me hate mail wondering where Rico is. I just got people sending me. I showed up last. I showed up from work. I got home from work today and just painted in like pig's blood on my garage door. Where's Rico?
Oof, that's rough, man. That's rough.
I'm like, I'm in the middle of the desert. How do people find me? So
know where he is.
No promises on Rico being back tomorrow, but stick with Buffalo Fanatics. Obviously, as the weekends roll around, you get Nap Nose Buffalo, and you get the 585 report as well. And it's almost BF tailgate season, ladies and gentlemen. It's
Mhm.
almost BF Jeff Lander season.
Jeff Landers can wake up from hibernation because he hates
Yeah.
the off season, and he can get back to doing his pregame.
Yeah, and
Pregame
Jay
lesson.
asked, where's Rico? Rico's in the process of moving right now.
Yes.
So all of his stuff is packed up, and he's with and without Wi-Fi and all those different things. So
Yeah,
he'll be
he's-
back in short order. I think he's moving soon. So he will be back, and we will all be better for it. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.